Firstly, can I thank Deputy O'D for affording me some time to speak on this bill? Because when a member opposite told me last week, by virtue of the fact, or by virtue of my surname, that I wasn't entitled to speak, and I expected that that would be the last of the matter. However, that sort of nasty, irreverent, insulting behaviour, not only against me but my predecessors of the same name, living and deceased, appears now to be extended to the majority of this House by virtue of the guillotine that's proposed. I suppose it's for fear that many of the government party members might go as far as to repeat in this House the misgivings that they have about this bill that they've been stating outside of this House and to media outlets and so forth. And it may be that were they to come in here and speak about it, that they might eventually convince themselves to vote against it. They're insulting their constituents by taking that path. And their constituents not only passed judgment on our party and defeating our party the last election, but gave a massive majority for Fine Gael and Labour and placed a huge amount of trust in them. And that election was preceded by a very tough, severe but progressive budget. A progressive budget, as said by the SRI, where over twice as much was taken out of the economy to the tune of $8.5 billion. But it was adjudged by that same SRI to have been fair by virtue of the pain being shared progressively. And various sections of the Irish society, including the carers, gave you a mandate based on many of your utterances, based on many of your commitments, based on many of your promises. And as Deputy says, I don't necessarily want to repeat them all either. But I witnessed government party candidates in my own constituency at committee, at public meetings with carers, tell them that there was an easier way than what had been gone beforehand, that there was a softer way, and that the bailout agreement would be overturned and renegotiated, and that bondholders would be burnt. You wouldn't burn a sod of turf. It's as simple as that. Now we hear different utterances and different mantras. Oh, we inherited the mess. It's someone else's fault. And we made election promises because that's what you do in elections. That's what you do in elections. I would have thought the situation was too serious to be at that sort of codology in the last election. I was elected to this House, the same as everybody else here, by their constituents. And despite my name, but on the basis of the Fianna Fáil record in my constituency, and on the basis that I would represent the views, the fears, the aspirations, the worries of those who elected me, as was everybody else in this House. And last night, I met with carers and carers association in my own constituency. And I heard it firsthand, as I did 2 years ago, before the election, when they passed judgment on my party and on yours by virtue of the mandate that you got. And their fears, their anxieties and their worries translate into the following utterances. That the respite care grant doesn't necessarily pay for holidays. It's not modest. It pays for the day-to-day expenses incurred by them and their carer, the person they're caring for, and their families. They've been affected by many other issues within this budget, within your social welfare bill, in addition to the modest cut, as Deputy Rabbit says. In relation to the household benefits package, the ESB payments and telephone payments will increase. They too are affected by the property tax. They too are affected by car tax, should they be lucky enough to have a car. They too, if they have children, or if the person they're caring for is a child, are affected by children's allowance cuts. They too are affected by prescription charges increases to the tune of 200% to a maximum of $19.50. One person of which told me last night it went from 12 to 19. That's 7 of an increase. And that goes with the $6.50 if you want to divide the respite care grant over a year to try and make it more modest than it is. They too are affected by college fees in relation to the Trinity pledge. They too are affected by back-to-school allowances. Do you want to add them all up? They'll come to a lot more than a modest amount of €300. Carers said that they were robbing Peter to pay Paul. They feel insulted. They feel let down. They feel used. They feel abused. These are their comments, they're not mine.
1 minute.
They're coming now. They have to fight for everything they get, they say. The carers allowance application process in its own right. The carers allowance application appeals process in its own right. The medical card situation has gone to pot again too. The whole thing is, and they worry then about when you say you're taking 3,000 workers out of the health service next year. What effect is that going to have on them? Because there's a lot of cuts, covert in nature, that have yet to be known to this House in relation to expenditure by all departments, especially in relation to health, when you're talking about social welfare and education that affect the people affected in this realm. Young carers are worried about their future because they feel there's nothing but barriers put in front of them, and mainly financial. Carers are now facing mental health issues by virtue of the situation they find themselves in. I'm about to finish, Count Corley. This budget and this social welfare bill has been described, and aptly so, as mean-spirited. And that opinion is shared by some members of government parties. And I want them, and I appeal to them, to reflect the opinions, the fears, the anxieties of their constituents as they were asked to do. And it's no harm or no shame in doing that if it means voting against what the Cabinet has put before this House in the form of the social welfare bill. And in doing that, they will be sending them back to Cabinet. They'll be sending them back to find ways and means by which savings can be made to close the gap, as we all accept has to be done. But we have put a costed system in place which didn't do it in the way you have done it. We have put forward what you tried to do with Cabinet but couldn't succeed in relation to the party that bows over you, in relation to the universal social charge. But you can do it if you're forced to do it by virtue of this House. You can still retain a majority. You can still be in government and still make changes. And nobody will say shame on you for that. What they will say is fair play to you and well done by virtue of the situation and circumstances we are in as a country. And those that we represent. As I said earlier in my speech, we represent the fears, worries, values, anxieties and hopes of those that elected us.
Okay.
And I, for one, have been told in no uncertain terms to come into this House at the expense of my own colleagues who have no choice, but they can't speak by virtue of what this government has done in relation to the guillotine. If you wanted to shut your own people up, that's one thing. But we won't stand idly by any longer in this realm. And I appeal to all members, especially those on the opposite side of the House, to vote according to their constituents' will